Copyright. Copyright is, simply put, a way for a creator to have legal protection over their work. So, whether it be a book, a song they wrote, it could just be like an idea, like an invention, and it prevents others from stealing whatever that they have created. I chose copyright, and more specifically, U.S. copyright law, as the topic for this video because of its many flaws. I believe that the current United States copyright laws are unfit for our modern and more technological age. One of the key aspects of copyright law is fair use. Fair use is utilized to determine if an artist's use of someone else's work is fair and not violating any copyright legislation. According to Title 17 of the United States Code, if something is deemed to fall under the fair use guidelines, then it is using someone else's work for either criticism, commentary, news reporting, education, scholarship, or research. This, however, does not help us a lot when determining what is fair use, due to the broad and more limited information we are given. Richard Stem from Stanford University sums it up perfectly when he says, "The difficulty in claiming fair use is that there is no way to guarantee that your use will qualify as fair. You may believe that your use qualifies, but if the copyright owner disagrees, you may have to resolve the dispute in a courtroom. Even if you ultimately persuade the court that your use was in fact a fair use, the expense and time involved in litigation may well outweigh any benefit of using the material in the first place. Because of the blurry line between what is considered fair and what is not, it is very hard for artists to determine whether or not their work will face any legal consequences." To quote Charlie Penrod from his document Restoring the Balancing Test, "Fair use analysts are overly vague and abstract. While the Copyright Act established 4 factors for courts to consider when determining if an alleged infringer's use of copyrighted work is fair, these factors are not susceptible to easy interpretation." So, you would think a system that affects us daily, especially with the internet making things a lot easier, it makes it a lot easier to consume a wide variety of things, especially with streaming services becoming a thing. So, yeah, you'd really expect this system to have been updated recently and would be kept fresh as the internet changes and evolves. But the truth is, it's old. So, yeah, there hasn't really been any major changes to copyright law since 1998. So, 1998. And so that was the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or also known as the DMCA. So, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act basically protected copyright holders from online theft. So 1998, the internet was still fairly new, so it definitely was not in the state that it is now, but it definitely laid a lot of the groundwork. Like there was online blogs and forums, and definitely some websites where you could share files and like different work, and specifically music. And so yeah, it hasn't changed since then. Even though the internet is constantly changing with new things, it hasn't changed in, well, a little over 20 years, which may not seem like a lot, but since we're in an environment where the internet is constantly changing, there's so constantly like new ways to enjoy content with streaming services. I know I mentioned that earlier. And like Spotify changed the music industry drastically. And so this is just another example of how old the current copyright system is and how desperately it needs to change. So, do you guys know how old Mickey Mouse is? This may seem like an odd question, but just hear me out. On November 18th, 2021, Mickey Mouse turns 93 years old. This is cool and all until you realize that he is still not in the public domain. This is largely because of the extensions made on the length of a copyright, which can be contributed to Disney lobbyists, but that's a whole other video. Title 17 states that a copyright lasts the life of the author plus 70 years after their death, so plus 70 years. If the copyright is held and contributed by a corporation, it's even longer. It is held for a period of 95 years from its first publication, or 120 years from its creation, whichever expires first. This is frankly outlandish, as it locks millions of ideas behind a vault for possibly over a century. This greatly limits artists' freedom and creativity, as they are forbidden from making anything similar to what's in this large catalog of vaulted content.
Objection!
When artists are paid for their work, through royalties for example, they are then able to produce more material.
The door was locked.
Another person can take inspiration from a work and add his own personal creative input to develop further creative works. This new work could then also be protected by copyright. Well, in theory, this inspires an artist's creativity, but also allows them to take inspiration from others' works, but in reality, this just isn't the case. It is very easy for publishers to take advantage of this system that gives artists a false sense of security, only to be struck down time and time again for taking inspiration from even a small portion of the publisher's content. Ultimately, the current state of our copyright system is not well suited for a world where sharing content is easier than ever and where large media corporations rigidly protect anything and everything they own. In order for all artists to have their works fairly protected and be more encouraged to create even more, lawmakers need to update our current copyright laws.